In this video, I am going to show you how to create a Works Cited page using the MLA format. Okay, so I'm going to show you how to access information for a Works Cited page in MLA format. First of all, if you go to the al.english.purdue.edu website, which we have spent some time at before, you will find a link to the MLA 2016 Formatting and Style Guide. This is the page you'll see once you've clicked on the link for the MLA Formatting and Style Guide. And from here, what we want to do is take a look at samples of how to do an MLA Works Cited page. So you're going to look towards the menu on the left side. If you scroll down the menu on the left side of the page, you will see a link that goes to an MLA sample Works Cited page. So we're going to go to that one first. The sample Works Cited page that you see at this link is a good overview of the general concepts. It's not perfect, however, and so what I want you to notice in this example is the general formatting. If you can see here, the Works Cited title is centered and at the top of the page, and each entry is separated in alphabetical order by the first word that shows up in the Works Cited entry. So one thing to see here is that if you have an entry that begins with the title because there is no author, you will start with the letter of the first main word. So if you notice here, this is going to start with I because A, and the are not counted in alphabetizing things. Another thing to notice in these examples is that they have listed the URLs. And in our practices, we haven't been using URLs because I just want you to focus on basic formatting. So anytime you see a URL in a sample, instead of including the complete URL, we've been writing web, which is perfectly fine for the purposes of what we do today. So just know that when you're looking at examples, anytime you see a URL, you're going to write WEB instead. Another thing to pay attention to is that each entry begins with the first line of that entry aligned all the way to the left side of the page, but then if it goes beyond one line, every line underneath is indented. The reason for this is that it makes it really obvious to the person looking at it which parts of the information belong to that specific entry, because the next entry doesn't begin until you see the next line that's showing up all the way to the left side of the page. Please keep in mind that this example of a Works Cited page is not perfect. It doesn't have the author's last name and page number in the top right hand corner, and the font is not in Times New Roman font, so that's something that will become a big issue later. But otherwise, this is a really good thing for you to see for basic outlining and formatting. So now let's take a look at a better example of what an accurate MLA sample paper should look like. So if you go to the left side of the screen again and look at your menu, we're going to go to the link that says MLA sample paper. If you notice, it's just underneath the sample Works Cited page. Once you've clicked on that link, it's going to take you to this page. And there's a few features here that are important to know. When you're looking at the MLA sample paper, it's showing you what a complete paper looks like, but it also has their notes on it to help you make sure that your paper is all formatted. There's a few things you can do here. You can click on this link and it should pop it out for you in a new window, and it'll allow you to save that file to your own computer or iPad. So if this is something you would like to access later, that's a really great feature. For our next step here, we're going to go to the box on the right hand side that has an arrow pointing out, and that's going to take the page into a new window. When it opens it in a new window, it should look like this. And there's some things you probably will see here that are also good to know. So on the right hand side at the top of your screen, you should probably see your Google account picture. You should probably see access to your Google Drive, and the button right there will allow you to open the file in another window that would also give you more save options. So if you want to save this example to your iPad or your computer, use some of these options. Now let's take a look at the paper itself. In your own essay that you have already turned in, your main page should look like this without the blue and green boxes. And you should already have on the type right hand side of your page your last name followed by the page number. That's important. And then on the left hand side of the page is where you have your heading. And if you notice, the title of your page should be centered. So we're going to follow very similar things in your Works Cited page, but here's the stuff to keep in mind. You will not have a heading on your Works Cited page. You will only have your header. This is the header. And the header should be inside the 1-inch margin at the top of the page. And the page number that you're going to use should be the last page number that would come right after the end of your last essay page. So for every one of you, that could be very different. If your essay was 3 pages long, then your Works Cited page number should be number 4, for example. Another thing to keep in mind is that the name and page number should be below the very top section of the page. So in order to do that in Google Docs, once you've inserted your page number and your last name, you just need to push enter twice to get it a little bit below the very top of the page. If it's too far up on the top of the page, then it won't print out when you print your file. So keep those things in mind. Okay, so if you scroll down that sample paper and you get all the way down to, I think it's page 10 of the paper, you'll find the Works Cited page. So again, notice that we have the author's last name, which would be your last name, and the page number on the top right-hand side of the page. And then notice the center title outside of the margin is Works Cited. And please, please, please keep in mind that works should be plural. A lot of people often forget that. And then I want you to take a look at each of the entries. So I know we've talked about this before, but let's look at it again. So you should see that each entry is listed in alphabetical order. So we've got A here, B here, D here. Notice that if you have multiple D's, then you put it in alphabetical order according to the letters that come afterwards. So D-A-N, D-E-M, D-R-O. So keep those things in mind. Other things to keep in mind are things like the fact that the title of books should be italicized. Notice that these titles do not have any quotation marks because you will never use quotation marks and italics together. It's either one or the other. So book titles are italicized, magazine titles are italicized, websites are italicized, but articles have quotation marks and are not italicized. Chapters of books have quotation marks and are not italicized. You should get the point. Again, an important reminder here is that if your entry goes over more than one line, then every line that belongs to it underneath that entry gets indented. So the way I try to explain this to you guys before is that this is the opposite of a paragraph. When you do a works cited entry, instead of indenting the first line like you would in a paragraph, the first line stays aligned all the way to the left and every line underneath gets indented. Other itty-bitty things to notice is just that the margins on each side of the page are all 1 inch. That's how yours should look. Remember that if you're writing in Google Docs, it automatically does that for you, and so you don't have to worry about it. But if you're using Pages or Microsoft Word, you will have to know how to do the margins. Also, notice that the font is in Times New Roman 12-point font. So this example right here is perfect for what your paper should look like. So just keep all of that stuff in mind. If you scroll down on that Works Cited page just a little further, you will see some more examples of how each entry could look a little bit different. So if you see here, the one that says Historical Census Browser, this would be an example of how you would format something that is not a book or an article. So you'll see here that we have quotation marks, and that will just tell the person automatically that it's not a book or a magazine. If you see the entry below it where you have the italics, then that's telling you that it's either a book or an article or a newspaper. So if you think of it this way, if you have the title of a larger work, that should be italicized, but anything that's smaller that could be published inside that work, like a chapter or an article, those things get quotation marks. Okay, so finally, let's just take a look at a sample Works Cited page as it would look without any of the markings all around it. Your paper, when you've finished it, should look just like this. And again, I'm just going to show you all the things to notice. First of all, you've got a name and the page number at the top right-hand side. Next, as you can see, the title is centered at the top of the page, and works is plural. Also, notice that on all sides of this page, we have 1 inch margins. And then keep in mind that everything should be in alphabetical order. So here we go again. This here is F, G, G-R-A-B. If you notice, we've got G-R-A-B-E, and then that's followed by G-R-A-B-E-R. So every letter counts in the alphabetizing process. H, K, okay, you get the point. Then also note that titles will look different depending on the type of source it comes from. So, for example, we've got a title of an article here, but it comes from a magazine called The New Yorker, so the title of the article has quotation marks, but New Yorker is italicized. So if you're looking at this whole page just from a distance, you can tell right away based on the quotation marks or the italicization of things right away without even having to read the titles what source comes from what kind of resource. Hopefully that made sense. Notice that this is actually written in Times New Roman font. And it is a size 12. So that's pretty important. Yours should also be in Times New Roman font size 12. Finally, the last thing I want you to notice is that in this particular example of a Works Cited page, instead of typing out URLs, they have also written the word WEB for web, for internet sources, or they have written print for sources that do not come off of the internet. So this one shows you exactly what I need you to produce for your Works Cited page. So now it's all up to you. Go ahead and get started.